It started like any quiet evening in Boise, Idaho. Spring air, laughter, a family birthday dinner. Candles flickered, glasses clinked. My son David turned 40 that night. The house was brighter than usual. The wine endless, the food expensive. Too expensive for someone who just asked me for money last week. I noticed new furniture, a chandelier I'd never seen before. Smiles felt rehearsed, but I said nothing. After all, it was his birthday. Then came the moment that still haunts me. As I stood to stretch heading toward the stairs, Emily, my granddaughter, grabbed my arm, harder than she ever had. Her voice was low, urgent. "Grandpa, don't go upstairs tonight, please, just don't." I froze. She looked pale, eyes wide, like she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to. "There's someone up there," she whispered. "Mom said, once you've had enough wine, you'll sign anything." My chest tightened. From upstairs, a door creaked, footsteps. Then, silence. I glanced at David. He smiled too fast, too wide. Stephanie appeared beside me, another drink in hand. "Just one more, Dad. Let's celebrate properly." But I wasn't thirsty anymore. I looked down at Emily. Her eyes shimmered with something between fear and warning. And right then I made the biggest mistake of the night. I smiled back and took a step toward the stairs. I should have listened. Richard Sullivan had hands like bricks, rough, scarred. The kind of hands that built things then carried them for others. For over 40 years he poured concrete by day and ran payroll by night. Never took shortcuts, never trusted easy money. He built Sullivan concrete and homes from a rusted truck and an old wheelbarrow. Back then he believed in two things: work hard and protect your family. His wife Martha had the soft voice to his calloused hands. She died 12 years ago. Since then his home had grown quieter, but his purpose remained. David, his only son, was supposed to inherit more than the business. He was meant to carry the name, the values, the weight of the legacy. But David chased big wins. Tech startups, real estate flips, crypto. Each failure brought a new apology. Each apology came with a request. And Richard, being a father, always gave, even when it hurt. By the time David turned 40, Richard had bailed him out more times than he could count. He kept a folder in his study, labeled David's Promises. Empty contracts, failed ventures, burned bridges, but hope that stayed. Because fathers don't quit on their sons. At least Richard didn't, but that night, as he raised a glass at David's birthday party, as the wine flowed and the laughter echoed louder than the trust in the room, he had no idea that the son he once built everything for was about to tear it all down. David Sullivan was born with charm, a wide smile, fast talker, bright eyes that could sell anything. In high school, he was the kid teachers adored even when he hadn't studied. In college, he majored in networking and minored in skipping class. He wanted success, but not the kind his father bled for. Richard used calloused hands. David preferred glossy pitch decks and buzzwords, disruption, scalability, guaranteed returns. He tried everything: a mobile app for dog sitters, luxury vending machines, a crypto farm in Nevada. All failed. Every time he fell, he came home with a new idea and an old excuse. "Just one more try, Dad. This time it's different." And every time Richard said yes, because that's what fathers do. But there was something else under David's confidence, lived resentment. He hated being the son of a builder. He wanted to be more than that. He wanted to own something without laying a single brick. When Martha died, David drifted further. Stephanie, his wife, took over the finances. Together they made plans, big ones. But the plans didn't include earning Richard's trust. They were done waiting, and now on David's 40th birthday, with the family gathered, with the wine flowing, David believed this was finally his moment. Not to build a future, but to take it, even if it meant crossing the man who gave him everything. Stephanie Walker married David during his first startup. He had no money, but he had stories, and Stephanie loved a good story as long as it ended in luxury. She came from comfort. Her father ran a financial advisory firm. Her mother hosted fundraisers in silk gowns. Stephanie wasn't cruel. She was calculated, always dressed perfect, smiled at the right moments, knew which wine to pour, and when to ask the hard questions. She didn't nag David, she managed him. Budgets, investors, even Richard. "Your father means well," she'd say, "but don't you think it's time you had control?" Over the years, Stephanie watched David chase dreams and watch them collapse. She was tired of losing, tired of waiting, tired of depending on a man who built homes with his hands while her husband sat on ideas that never lived past PowerPoint. So she made a new plan, one with fewer variables. They wouldn't earn the business. They'd inherit it paper by paper, signature by signature. Stephanie contacted a private notary, reached out to a legal firm, prepared every document, set the date. All she needed was Richard in the right mood, a little wine, a little pressure, and the right moment upstairs. She even rehearsed what she'd say. "It's just a formality, Dad. Everyone signs it. You'll feel better tomorrow." But she never planned on Emily hearing things she shouldn't have, or Richard still being sharper than she thought. Emily Sullivan never liked fancy things. While her parents talked about equity and investments, she buried herself in books, psychology, philosophy, old mystery novels she borrowed from Grandpa's shelf. At 17, she was sharp, observant, quiet in the way smart kids often are. She saw things most people missed. She noticed when her dad lied, his eyes darted left. She noticed when her mom pretended, her smile froze for half a second too long. But it was her bond with Grandpa that shaped her. He taught her how to fish, how to fix a loose cabinet, how to listen without interrupting. They had a routine. Every Sunday, black coffee, old jazz, a deck of cards. Richard never talked down to her, and Emily never forgot that. So when she overheard her mother whisper, "He signs tonight. We've waited long enough," something inside her snapped. It wasn't just a scheme. It was betrayal against the only person who ever saw her for who she was. That night during the party, she stayed close to Grandpa, watched every refill, heard every hint of manipulation. She didn't know all the details, but she knew one thing. Something was very wrong upstairs. So, when Richard stood reaching for his wine and walking toward the staircase, she didn't hesitate. "Grandpa," she whispered, grabbing his wrist, "please don't go up there." He looked at her confused. She looked back terrified. That moment changed everything. It was supposed to be simple. A small family dinner, a birthday celebration, 40 candles, one cake. But when Richard stepped through the front door, he knew something was off. Too many lights, too many guests, and not a single familiar neighbor. The living room had been transformed. New rug, new chandelier, leather chairs that still smelled like the showroom. Wine glasses clinked against crystal. Catered trays floated from the kitchen. Laughter filled the air, but it felt just a little too loud, a little too forced. Richard scanned the room. David was hosting like a politician, shaking hands, slapping backs, smiling like his jaw might crack. Stephanie stood by the bar, charming, efficient. She refilled Richard's glass before it was even empty. "We went all out," she beamed. "David deserves a real milestone moment." But Richard wasn't celebrating. His mind wandered. Last week, David said he was broke, 2 months behind on mortgage. asking for a short-term bridge loan. Yet tonight he was pouring $200 wine and handing out party favors wrapped in gold ribbon. Something didn't add up. Richard took a slow sip. The wine tasted expensive, too smooth. He glanced at Emily. She stood across the room watching everything. Not smiling, just watching. And that's when it hit him. This wasn't a party. It was a presentation, and he was the closing deal. It began with small things. The first toast. David raised his glass. To family, to new chapters. Everyone clapped, but Richard noticed the phrasing. New chapters. Then came the second glass of wine, then the third. Each time, Stephanie appeared beside him, smiling, smooth, silent. Just a little more, Dad. You're not driving tonight. The music grew louder, but not loud enough to drown the whispers. He caught glimpses. David talking to a man in a gray suit, not someone Richard recognized. Not a friend. A document folder passed quickly between hands, tucked beneath a coat. Gone in seconds. Richard's instincts kicked in. Decades in construction taught him how to spot pressure, especially the kind that wore perfume. Stephanie leaned in. David's been thinking a lot about your legacy, she said, her voice soft. He just wants to make sure it's protected. Then David joined in, casual smile on his face. We even brought someone tonight who can help with the paperwork. Nothing formal, just keeping it in the family. Richard blinked. He hadn't mentioned business, hadn't brought up succession, hadn't said a word about signing anything. Why were they? He set his glass down. It trembled slightly. Across the room, Emily caught his eye. Still silent, still watching. And suddenly Richard understood. This wasn't pressure, this was a setup, and it had just begun. Richard excused himself. Said he needed air. No one stopped him. They were too busy watching. He slipped into the kitchen, empty, quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you look twice. That's when he saw it. A manila folder neatly placed near the coffee maker. Not hidden, but not on display either. The label was handwritten. Transfer documents, Sullivan Holdings. His name, his company. His pulse jumped. He didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he stepped back, slow, steady. His eyes scanned the hallway. Two unfamiliar men stood near the stairs dressed like they belonged in a law office. Polished shoes. No drinks. No smiles. What were they doing here? Richard knew lawyers. He'd worked with dozens. You didn't bring them to birthday parties, unless paperwork needed signing. He walked past the study. A leather briefcase sat slightly open on the desk. Inside pens, tabs, legal pads, and a document with the header authorization of executive control, Sullivan Concrete. He felt sick, not scared, worse, betrayed, not by strangers but by blood. He returned to the party. Music, laughter, champagne flutes, but suddenly it all sounded like noise, like a show staged just for him. And somewhere deep inside, a voice he hadn't heard in years whispered, "Get out, now." Richard turned toward the patio. Fresh air, he needed space, time to think. But before he could reach the door, Emily stepped in front of him, face pale, eyes wide. She wasn't smiling like earlier. "Grandpa," she whispered, "don't go upstairs tonight." He blinked. "What?" She glanced over her shoulder, nervous, lowered her voice. "They're waiting up there, with papers, with a lawyer." His stomach turned. "I overheard them talking last night. Mom said they just needed you to drink enough so you'd be relaxed. Dad said you'd never say no to family." Richard felt the room spin, the wine, the sudden friendliness, the guests he didn't know. The folder by the coffee pot. It all lined up. Emily reached for his hand. "Please, just leave, now. I'll cover for you." Her fingers trembled. She wasn't just nervous, she was scared. He searched her eyes. No lie, no game, just raw, desperate truth. Why are you helping me? Her voice cracked. Because you're the only person who ever believed in me. And they don't deserve your trust. A beat of silence, one breath. Richard straightened, his voice steady low. Thank you, sweetheart. I won't forget this. He turned toward the front door. No goodbyes, no drama. Just a quiet escape from a trap laid in velvet. The front hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Richard's footsteps echoed softly on the hardwood floor. Every click of his heel sounded like a countdown. He reached the coat closet, slipped on his jacket, keys in hand. Behind him, laughter, a cork popping, the sound of silverware against china. No one noticed. Until Dad Trevor's voice came from the living room. Too casual, too timed. Richard didn't turn. You heading somewhere? He paused, hand on the doorknob. Yeah, it's getting late. I've got an early meeting tomorrow. A beat of silence, then Meredith's voice. But the cake, we haven't cut the cake yet. Still, he didn't turn. Didn't blink. Save me a slice. Then, from behind, footsteps approaching. Faster now. Richard opened the door, stepped outside. Cool night air hit his face like truth. Sharp. Real. His phone buzzed. Emily. He answered without hesitation. I'm out. Her relief came in a shaky breath. Thank God. I was so scared they'd corner you. He looked back through the window. Trevor stood behind the curtain, watching, smiling, but not with warmth, with calculation. Richard's jaw tightened. He wasn't done. They had played their hand. Now it was his turn, and he would play it perfectly. The taxi pulled away from Trevor's house, but Richard's mind raced faster than the car. He stared out the window past streetlights and storefronts, seeing only betrayal. Not anger, not heartbreak, something colder. Clarity. They'd tried to strip him of everything, his business, his dignity, his mind. With wine, with fake warmth, with legal papers upstairs. He clenched his fists. They thought I was weak, thought I'd just fade. Not tonight. Back at home, Richard stepped into the foyer, turned on every light. His house was no longer just a home. It was a war room. He went straight to his study, unlocked the filing cabinet, the one with everything. Contracts, emails, bank transfers. Every failed investment Trevor had made, every scam he fell for, every lie covered by a business opportunity. Richard pulled them out one by one. You turned your back on me, son. Now I'll show the world who you really are. He opened his laptop, created a fresh folder, Trevor evidence package. Each document scanned, labeled, time-stamped. Methodical, unemotional, like laying bricks or digging a grave. The cursor blinked at the center of the screen, waiting for the next move. And Richard knew. Tomorrow, the world would see his son not as a victim of rejection, but as a con man finally exposed. Revenge wouldn't come with rage. It would come with receipts. Morning came gray and cold, but Richard was wide awake before dawn. Coffee in hand, printer humming like a battle drum. Each page that rolled out bore the truth emails, investment records, tax filings, even Meredith's name on falsified advisory statements. This isn't revenge, he muttered. It's justice with a paper trail. He spread the documents across his dining table, labeled them meticulously. Package 1. Marcus Eldridge lost $50,000 in Trevor's crypto scam. Package 2. Lena Patel swindled through a fake food truck startup. Package 3. The Chamber of Commerce president who vouched for Trevor last year. Richard knew the community. He'd built homes for half the town. They'd listen if the message was clean, professional, and delivered discreetly. So he crafted letters. No emotion, no accusations. Just, for your awareness regarding ongoing financial misconduct by Trevor Myers. See attached documents. Signed, a concerned citizen. He sealed each envelope. No fingerprints, no return address. Then came the courier calls. Same-day delivery. Confidential. Business documents only. No questions asked. By 10 a.m., 3 sleek black envelopes were already en route, and with them the truth. Richard stood at the window watching the street sipping his second coffee. You used my name to build lies, Trevor. Now I'll use the truth to tear them down. No threats, no shouting, just silence and precision. The kind that doesn't just hurt a reputation, it erases it. By Monday morning, Richard didn't have to wonder if his plan worked. At 8:47 a.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He didn't answer, but he knew. At 9:12, a second call, then a third. Voicemail notifications piling up like dominoes. Richard sipped his coffee unmoved. Then, at 9:36, it happened. Bang, bang, bang. 3 sharp knocks on the door. He opened it to chaos in designer heels. Meredith stood there, flushed, panicked eyes wild behind her flawless makeup. "What the hell did you do, Richard?" Her voice cracked, all the control stripped away. "I was pulled into HR this morning. Pinnacle's investigating me for client fraud." Richard didn't flinch, didn't blink. He stepped aside and let her storm in. She paced the living room, heels clicking like a countdown to detonation. "They have documents, emails, expense reports, things only you would have had access to. I gave them nothing but facts," Richard said, voice like stone. "And if those facts are enough to end your career, maybe that says more about you than me." Meredith froze. For the first time, no comeback, no threat, just silence. "They're suspending me pending review," she whispered. "My accounts, my bonuses, everything." Richard set down his mug. "You tried to use your position to rob me blind. Consider this accountability." Tears welled up, but he didn't move to comfort her. Because this wasn't family drama anymore. This was justice. And justice doesn't flinch when the guilty start to cry. Tuesday evening. The sun dipped below the Oregon hills, casting long shadows across Richard's driveway. A black sedan pulled in too fast, slammed brakes, slammed door. Trevor, disheveled. No blazer. Tie hanging loose like a noose. He didn't knock, just burst into the living room like a storm unraveling. "You destroyed me, Dad." His voice cracked raw, not from anger, but something worse. Fear. "Marcus dropped me from the investment group. Lena won't return my calls. The chamber blacklisted me. I have nothing left." Richard stood still, arms crossed, letting the silence answer. "You think you're better than me," Trevor spat. "You think ruining your own son makes you a hero?" "No," Richard said evenly. "I think protecting the truth makes me whole again." Trevor staggered back a step. "You think this is justice? You think this fixes anything?" "I think," Richard said, taking a breath, "it's the only language you finally understand consequences." Trevor collapsed into the armchair. The same one Richard used to read him bedtime stories from. Now, just wreckage in human form. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't know it would go this far. Meredith said we'd just get you to sign something, that it was harmless." Richard's jaw clenched. "You punctured my tires. Tried to trick me while drunk. Hired lawyers, Trevor. That's not harmless. That's betrayal." Trevor looked up, eyes hollow. "What now?" Richard turned away. "Now you live with it," and walked out of the room, leaving the silence and his son to shatter. The next morning, a soft knock on Richard's door broke the stillness. He opened it to find Molly, no makeup hoodie pulled over her head, eyes red. "Can I come in?" "Always," Richard said, stepping aside. She sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd eaten waffles as a child. Now she sat as a woman burdened by a truth most adults wouldn't dare carry. "They know it was me," she whispered. "Mom screamed at me last night. Dad didn't say anything, just stared." Richard's heart tightened. They said I betrayed them, that I ruined everything. You protected someone who would never use you, he said gently. That's not betrayal, that's courage. She looked down, fidgeting with her bracelet. I don't regret it, but it hurts. I know, he nodded. Doing the right thing often does. Molly took a shaky breath. I've decided to move out. I've got savings and a roommate near campus. I can't stay in that house anymore. Richard placed a hand over hers. You'll always have a home here. Her eyes welled again. I didn't just save you, Grandpa, I saved myself. He smiled, proud. You broke the cycle, Molly. That's what heroes do. Outside, morning light filtered through the window brighter than it had in weeks. And inside, for the first time, Richard felt something stronger than revenge. Hope. Richard sat in his study, the early light casting long shadows across his desk. Stacks of folders lay open, each page a scar from the past 10 years. But this wasn't about pain anymore, it was about closure. He picked up the phone and dialed the number of an old friend, Elaine Cooper, a retired federal prosecutor now consulting on white-collar crime. Elaine, it's Richard. I need a favor. Her voice didn't skip a beat. This about Trevor. I've got a file, he said. False signatures, coerced contracts, and intent to defraud a business owner. She whistled. You're not just burning the bridge, Rich. You're paving over it with concrete. Richard leaned back in his chair, exhaling. They nearly got me. Lawyers were waiting upstairs. I'd have signed everything if Molly hadn't stepped in. Elaine's voice turned steel. I'll have a team review everything. If what you're saying checks out, we're looking at criminal conspiracy. And Meredith's license gone. Richard clicked his pen once, twice. Do it. Not out of anger, but because people like them shouldn't walk away clean. A pause. And Rich, good for you. Most parents cover it up. You're choosing justice. I'm choosing peace, he said softly. He hung up, gathered the final envelope, labeled it, for Molly, in case of emergency. Inside, his will business succession plan and a letter that ended with, You are the best part of my legacy. He sealed the envelope. Checkmate. 6 months had passed. The maple trees along Chestnut Drive had turned gold again, just like they always did in October. But for Richard, this fall didn't feel like any other. It felt free. The house was quieter now. No angry calls. No late-night emails begging for one last chance. Just the soft ticking of the grandfather clock and the occasional rustle of Molly's laughter upstairs during a weekend visit home. Meredith had lost her license. Trevor was awaiting sentencing for fraud and conspiracy. His plea deal reduced thanks to full cooperation. Richard hadn't visited him, not out of cruelty, but because the wounds needed time to close. He sat on the back porch with a mug of black coffee, watching the wind shake loose the last leaves from the oaks. Molly stepped outside holding a folder. Grandpa, I looked over the business succession plan you left me. He turned to her expectant. It's incredible. I want to learn. From the ground up, like you did. He smiled a kind of smile he hadn't felt in years. You'll do better than I ever did. She paused. Was it worth it exposing them? He looked toward the horizon. Yes, because revenge ends with punishment, but justice ends with peace. She slipped her hand into his. They sat together, 2 generations, bound not by blood alone, but by truth, courage, and the promise of something better. The wind carried the last leaf away, and with it the weight of everything they'd left behind. 6 months had passed. The house no longer echoed with tension. There were no more whispers behind closed doors, only the quiet hum of peace. Meredith lost her financial license. Her firm distanced themselves overnight. She disappeared from social events, her name now synonymous with scandal. Trevor faced legal charges, fraud, conspiracy, intent to deceive. He took a plea deal avoiding prison but losing everything. Richard never visited, not out of hate, out of mercy. because healing meant letting go, not reopening wounds. Meanwhile, Molly blossomed. She enrolled in a business ethics course, started an internship at a local nonprofit, and began shadowing Richard at the company. She didn't want shortcuts. She wanted to learn the foundation, every brick, every nail. One quiet Sunday, they sat on the porch together, coffee in hand. "Grandpa," she asked, "do you regret what you did?" He paused. Watched the wind chase leaves across the lawn. "No," he said, "because revenge is loud. It burns fast and leaves ash. But justice is quiet. It rebuilds." She nodded slowly, taking in every word. "You didn't just protect a business," she whispered. "You protected what's right." Richard looked at her eyes, soft but steady. "And now it's your turn. Build it better. With honesty, with strength, with heart." The sun dipped behind the trees. Not the end, just a new beginning. And in that moment, Richard realized he hadn't just won back his name. He'd passed it on clean. That night, as Richard closed the office for the last time that week, he paused at the glass door. His reflection stared back, older, wiser, but whole again. He didn't see a man broken by betrayal. He saw a man rebuilt by truth. As he locked up, Molly's laughter echoed from the parking lot. She was helping a junior staff member jumpstart their car. Her leadership had already begun. Richard smiled. Not every legacy is made of concrete and contracts. Sometimes it's built from integrity, one hard decision at a time. Revenge. That was never the goal. But justice left room for redemption. As Richard climbed into his truck, he looked one last time at the skyline of Tacoma, Washington, the city that had tested him but never took him. He turned the key. The engine purred to life. The past was behind him. But the future, it rode in the passenger seat, wearing a seatbelt, asking questions and taking notes. Now ask yourself, if someone you loved tried to steal everything you built, would you forgive them, or would you fight with the truth? Let us know in the comments below. Tap subscribe for more revenge stories like this, where the line between justice and vengeance isn't always clear. And remember, sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest truths. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next story.